to our first chat with a replenishment manager of the year in 2022. Crazy to say that we are already here. I am so excited that today I am joined by Miss Amber from Igloo. Amber and I have known each other, worked with each other for a really, really long time. And I'm so glad that I get to have her here, harass her, pick her brain, and bother her on all things replenishment. As we all know, 2021 was just a crazy year as far as global supply chain goes. We are reading a lot of reports and just a lot of industry news that the trend is probably going to continue in the year 2022, which is crazy. So one of the things that we say at Supply Bike all the time is that it takes a village to be a supplier to Walmart. You guys know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of work and understanding and tribal knowledge that isn't always really easy to access. And so one of the things that we are trying to do here at Supply Pike is really create an avenue for suppliers, if you've done business with Walmart for 20 years, or even if you've done business with Walmart for 1 year, to kind of learn from each other, exchange ideas in a safe space where you feel like you can ask the more challenging questions or more technical questions that maybe you may not be able to get answered by the Walmart teams necessarily. So super excited to have Amber here today. Really quickly wanted to go over the housekeeping just so you guys have an idea of what to expect. We'll be going through the introduction and a little bit of housekeeping from 1 to about 1:05. And then I'll be interviewing Amber with some questions that we've kind of prepared beforehand to get her thoughts on replenishment and OTIF in this post-pandemic era. And then we're going to save about 10 minutes for the end for just open Q&A session. So, which leads me to kind of my next point. If you guys notice, you should see a little Q&A icon within the Zoom bar. Usually it's located at the bottom of the screen. Highly, highly, highly recommend that you send in your questions. Feel free at any time. I will usually try and pepper them in throughout our conversation. And of course, if it's a more general question, then we'll try and save that towards the end. And usually we get a lot of questions. So again, highly recommend that you go ahead and send them in as early as possible, and we will try to get through all of them as much as we can. Any questions that we don't get to throughout our conversation today, we'll be sure that either Amber or myself will address in a follow-up email to make sure that you have all of your questions answered. So really quickly, again, super excited to introduce Amber Bumgardner. Amber is the Senior Manager of Replenishment at Igloo Products. She has over 7 years of experience working in replenishment, and I, again, personally know her. She is a superstar. She is amazing at what she does. So again, if you have any technical replenishment questions, this is like the best chance to ask. And she also has over 2 years of working with Walmart. So she's kind of been in the belly of the beast, and again, can give us a little bit of context and all of that good stuff. So last thing that I kind of wanted to share with you guys is if you are curious about additional resources around OTIF or replenishment, or even around things like deductions or sales or in stocks, please feel free to check out Supplier Wiki. It is a completely free resource available to you where we answer almost every question under the sun about what it means to be a Walmart supplier. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and stop this screen share so that Miss Amber and I can start our conversation. So Amber, hello.
Hello.
Thank you again for being here. We're so excited to have you. So really quickly, just wanted to start things off with, could you kind of explain to us what your current role is at Igloo? How long have you been there? What is your retail background?
Yeah, so I have been with Igloo almost 2 years, 2 years in March. I am the Senior Manager over supply chain and replenishment. So I have a team under me that handles, the logistics part of it, supply chain from production, order processing, everything of that sort. So I oversee all of that, all of the replenishment, POS, reporting, sales, forecast, anything like that.
Wow.
It's a lot. Yes. I have an amazing team. Our whole team in Bentonville we have such an amazing team, from our director of sales and our national account managers. We have an amazing team here in Bentonville that I'm super thankful for.
That's awesome.
So prior to my role with Igloo, I was an account manager for a broker company. So I work with multiple different suppliers. I've been a sales analyst and a business analyst, or a business replenishment analyst. Prior to being in the supplier world, I started my retail career with Walmart in the logistics. And I was a coordinator for direct imports.
Okay.
So you can imagine, you know how hectic direct imports is. So I'm thankful to have that knowledge now outside of Walmart.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was
So
gonna say, it sounds like you've kind of had a little taste of everything.
mhm.
And I know you just mentioned being on the Walmart side. We'll not hold that against you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Could you maybe, Amber, just kind of to give a little bit of context to those on the call, like what is the difference between being on the Walmart side and being on the retailer side versus working at a supplier? What are the different considerations, the different priorities that you have to think about when you're kind of switching between the two?
That's a great question, because when I left Walmart, I had at that point had been in Sam's and Fresh. And so when I left Walmart, it was kind of a culture shock, right? Where you have to take into consideration your production timing, your supply chain, your lead times, so many things that when you're in Walmart, you know these things, and you know these things are important, but it's not until once you're outside in the supplier world, understanding how important those things are for replenishment, for sales, for all of it. Not only that, when you're out in the supplier, you typically have to build your own reports, build your own,
It's so true.
Whereas in Walmart, they've got huge teams. I mean, it's a huge company. They've got
Right.
huge teams that they have those resources ready for you.
Okay.
So those two things were the two biggest transitions, I think, for me, is wrapping my head around the production, supply chain, all of it. And then just building all of my own reports, my own tools, things like that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And kind of to your point, like, so at Supply Pike, we work with a whole bunch of different teams, and all of them are at different levels of expertise. So kind of like I mentioned, we've got the folks that have been like, I've been working with Walmart for 25 years. Like, I shook Sam Walton's hand, which is really cool to hear. And then we also have those teams that are like, I just got my first deal with Walmart and I will be shipping in a month from now, and I don't really know what I'm doing. So it is kind of crazy, especially in Northwest Arkansas, that we just have this incredible community of suppliers that have really seen it all, very much like you. You've kind of been in Walmart, you've worked with tiny companies, and you've worked with giant companies like Igloo as well. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously we can't have a conversation about retail and supply chain without talking about COVID, of course. I think, would it be fair to say kind of 2020 was a big scrambling year for everybody? No one really knew what was going on. We're just trying to make the most of it. All those insane runs on product, the toilet paper gate, and all of that
Never
stuff. Yes, never forget. And then in 2021, I think people started to get used to the new normal, not only from the consumer perspective, but from the supplier perspective as well. Now that we're looking forward into 2022, so we're really at the start of the year, what's your take on that, Amber? Do you think that the impact of COVID is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future? Are we hoping to see it go away? Are we building up capacity, or what does that really look like for the supplier?
I mean, I think we're all hoping to see it go away, but the reality of it is we're heading into 2022 with the exact same challenges that we had coming out of 2021. We're seeing container delays, production delays, component price, fluctuation and delays, and just from so many areas of the business that all kind of go into supply chain. which
Right.
then, I mean, it all kind of, it's a domino effect, right? And then it all goes down and eventually it hits the shelves and we see that.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I don't see it going away in the foreseeable future. I hope that it gets better towards, second half of the year.
Right.
Um, but I think we're slowly kind of getting more of a grasp on it.
Could you share, Amber, from, and obviously without sharing any proprietary information or anything like that, but just kind of big picture, what are some of the strategies that you guys are implementing at Igloo? Are you, working with your manufacturers sooner in hopes to kind of get ahead of those lead times? Are you having conversations with buyers? Again, just kind of big picture strategy, just because we always have a lot of newer suppliers on the call. And many times, they're dealing with the exact same things that kind of the big guys are dealing with, but they may not necessarily know the different levers they can pull. I didn't know I could talk to my buyer. I didn't know I could talk to my manufacturer. Could you share, Amber, again, in broad strokes, kind of what
Yeah,
you guys and what your team is doing to get ahead of these challenges?
absolutely. So I will say communication, like word of the day, communicate.
For sure.
Communicate, talk, email, pick up the phone. Um, kind of what you said about reaching out sooner, when we anticipate something, or if we get, an inkling, maybe there's something coming down the pipe, a feature or something, we can reach out and we can start getting those conversations going earlier. Whereas, before, say you had like a direct import program, for instance, and you would wait until you got your POs, and which is a whole process, as you know.
Yes.
Um,
Don't miss that.
yeah, and so now it becomes reaching out sooner and saying, okay, we have, our commitment for this. Like, what can we do? Because typically manufacturers, they don't like to start on your product until you have your POs.
Right.
So it becomes a lot of communication, communication with your buyer, keeping your buyer updated on those conversations that you're having with your, your warehouse or your manufacturer or whatever it may be. It's all about communicating.
Okay.
And so nothing comes up out of the blue.
Yeah. Tactically speaking, Amber, and I know you can really only kind of speak to the buyers that you work with, as we know, for better or for worse, every buyer is their own person at Walmart.
Right.
But have you seen for your department and your teams, is Walmart being a little bit more proactive with their communication? We've kind of seen both. We've seen some of the teams that we work with say, oh, Walmart's amazing. They're giving us our commits, months in advance, compared to when they would before. And we've also heard from other teams where they're like, I cannot get a hold of my Walmart buyer. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like we've been fortunate to where we really do have open, great communication. And so just explaining those needs to the buyers, I really think it just comes down to that specific buyer, right? But all you can do is go to them and say, this is where we're at. This is the timing that we're looking at due to delays or whatever it may be. This is when we need these POs, or this is when we need this commitment by. It's just having that open door, like just go to them and tell them what you need. And so we've been fortunate to see like our buyers that we work with have been very receptive to that.
That's
and
awesome.
they'll do what they can, and not saying that they're going to just give you what you give you what you want all the time, but I think they appreciate that openness, and that creates a good partnership. And they really do try to give you at least a little bit,
Yeah, that's awesome. And that actually brings up kind of a tangential question to that, and one that we get asked by our teams a lot, which is, as kind of the Walmart buyer is like the do not contact, do not disturb, like don't talk to them unless it's like the world is on fire.
right?
And has that been your experience, Amber? Like, what is your advice, especially again for kind of the newer folks that
Mhm.
maybe don't have the established relationships with their Walmart buyers? Is it okay to quote unquote bother your buyer? When is it okay to reach
Mhm.
out to them? What is too much communication? What are your thoughts and best practices for that?
Honestly, I think whether you are a new supplier or whether you are a large supplier, um, having a weekly or biweekly touch base. We have a weekly 30-minute touch base. And we can basically get everything that we need, the main critical things taken care of right then. We have the whole team and we're able to get some kind of response back on anything that is outstanding. And so that's a huge thing for our team is we've got that. We also have a replenishment and transportation weekly touch base.
Mm. And is that
Um,
with your replenishment manager and SSM rather than the buyer?
mhm. So our replenishment manager, and then we've got all of the whether you're collector prepaid, it's going to depend there, but we've got the collect team from Walmart that can join if needed.
That's
And
awesome.
so it's just I think that especially for a new supplier, having those expectations set up front, like let's just even if it's 15 minutes,
Hmm.
30 minutes, set that up. Tell them we want this, we want to make sure we're all on the same page, because understanding your merchants and what their goals are and what their expectations are is going to get you further.
Right. No, I think you're totally right. And something too that maybe you could consider that, or our supplier teams can consider that I've seen work in the past is you can say, hey, let's set up these weekly or bi-weekly touch bases for the first 3 months.
Yep.
If I'm a new supplier, I don't really know what I'm doing, can we have those touch bases with your team for the first 3 months just to make sure that the mod drop goes well, so on and so forth. And after that, if everything is smooth sailing, like we should never have to meet and I will not take up any other time,
Yeah,
buyer.
exactly.
um,
Or in your in season, like in your busy time, if it
Good point.
helps
Yeah,
to have those just touch bases. Let's see how everything's going. Is there anything we can do to help mitigate any issues or anything? So I think it's a really good tool to have.
that's awesome. And kind of again, tangential to that, Amber. So, in the situations where, I mean, you and I both have had experiences with buyers that are less than receptive to that sort
Mhm.
of communication. Um, what are some of your best practices? So, we actually, we had a chat with Hume, who's one of the a Walmart buyer
Mhm.
last year, and she told us that they get like 200 to 300 emails a day, which is like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. What are some of your best practices when it comes to actually sending written communication to your buyer to make sure that it's going to be read, to make sure that it's going to be responded to? Do
Mhm.
you have any thoughts on that?
I would say one, if it is critical, send it early in the day, early in the week, because towards the end of the week, you're gonna, if it's something that you need to have an answer on, and don't be afraid to. Don't I wouldn't say everything is critical or everything needs to be high importance, but if it actually is, don't be afraid to use that. Don't be
Right.
afraid to use your little exclamation
Yeah,
and make it high importance. Just don't get in a habit of doing that
for
constantly.
everything.
Yeah, because
Right.
then it becomes, oh, well, but written communication to our buyers, I mean, we it's typical. They don't get back right away because they are super busy. But adding in the associate buyer,
Mhm.
the planner, and the replenishment manager, if it's something that they can help with, is always a good tactic.
Yeah,
If you need something right then, send it to the team.
right. And
Someone can help.
that's a good point, Amber. And I think something that we don't really think about or gloss over a lot is you always think, oh, reach out to the buyer. And of course there are certain things that only the buyer can approve,
Hmm.
definitely. But I think, kind of to your point, maybe one of the best practices that we can share with those on the call is get to know the rest of your Walmart team. Who
Yes.
is your RM, who is your SSM, who is your planner. And these folks can help, especially on the more, I think, tactical questions. To your point, Amber, I think they can probably get you answers a lot more quickly than a buyer. Sometimes the buyers may not even have that context, and they need to go ask the planner, who then can turn around and tell you.
And to go with that, like getting to know the team, you then, when you're getting to know the team, you know who is responsible for what. You know, if it's something, you know, tactical, like something for item maintenance or something, you could probably go to the associate merchant. You know,
Right.
it's just understanding what the different roles are and who actually touches what your request is.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So shifting gears a little bit, to kind of talk a little bit more on the data side of replenishment. Can you expand and share a little bit, Amber, on what sort of metrics from in your role and your replenishment team, what sort of metrics are you guys reporting to Walmart? What sort of metrics are you guys looking at on you know, kind of a regular basis? Is it your in stocks, your fill rate, on time percentage? And you know, what kind of reports are you guys pulling? What kind of apps are you using? I know it's a very loaded question, so I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. So of course, with replenishment, everything kind of goes into replenishment. So you look at your sales, your turns, your sell through, your any kind of trends that you're seeing, your lead times, because I say lead times because that then goes into your OTIF, right?
Right.
So understanding your lead times, watching those to see if they shift at all. Definitely forecast, definitely in stocks.
Okay. And are those metrics that you're looking at daily, monthly, weekly? What does that cadence look like for you?
At least weekly, but for me, usually a few times a week.
Okay.
Reviewing in stocks and forecast. We of course weekly sales, weekly POS sales by item and overall by department. And most of those are at a weekly basis, with the exception of probably forecast and in stocks.
Okay. And are you then, Amber, so, you know, kind of wanting to understand where replenishment fits in the puzzle, because there's sales and replenishment and supply chain, and it's really kind of, you know, all meshed together truly. But what are you using, for example, the forecast data with? Are you turning around and working with your manufacturers to say, hey, this is what we're expecting? And kind of on the other side of that, how do you utilize your in-stock data to talk with your sales team on like, hey, this is, you know, we can push more of this product, or maybe we need to hold off on this product? I guess, what does that relationship look like, data between different teams?
So understanding your forecast is going to help understanding your inventory. So with the GRS forecast, if it's not high enough or if it's too low, your inventory is just not going to hit right at store level. Your in stocks are going to suffer one way or the other. But taking into consideration those variables, so you're at a 90% in stock, you're underselling your forecast. Okay, well, you've got to take into consideration what you would be selling if you were at 100%, we'll say 100%, 98, versus what we've been underselling. And you have to kind of take all of that into consideration when you're making any kind of suggestions. And then, because in stocks, inventory, supply chain has all been quite a struggle. So just understanding your supply chain, it starts there, I think, and kind of trickles down. Understanding what your supply chain looks like, what your production looks like, what, you know, if you've got inventory coming in from overseas, what all of that looks like, the timing of it looks like, and then you can help lead the sales team, right, to what you've got available, what items are in stock, what items are below in stock goal, and what we're seeing as far as trends. If we're seeing an item that's doing really well, like as soon as we get into the store, it's gone. So let's focus on that. Let's bump up the supply chain there. But also utilizing Walmart's forecast for internal forecast, and also the ladder plan that the replenishment managers send out is a huge one because it has recommended order. And so there's just so many pieces of the
Right.
puzzle,
I
and they
was
all
gonna
just kind of
say.
fit together.
Right, right, right. But I think pulling out what you said, and I think you have a really good point, is kind of step one is just understanding your own supply chain. Like
Yes.
where it's so hard. Like on one hand, you kind of want to like reduce it to like, oh, as long as you do this, your in stocks will always be this.
Right.
But it's not that simple. It really is kind of balancing a lot of just different pieces of the supply chain puzzle.
Mhm.
So kind of knowing that, Amber, again, especially for the newer folks on the call, like where did you learn all of this? Are there resources, teams, websites that are out there that our teams can utilize as a resource? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely utilize Supplier Academy. If you've got time, go through those modules. That really helps you to understand what Walmart is looking for when they're sending. I mean, there's a whole video on the ladder plan,
Mhm.
for example. Just going through those and understanding what Walmart is looking for, I think is super helpful. In addition, we've got this great Walmart supplier Facebook group that honestly is one of the most invaluable resources that we have, because you can ask a question and you can get many different responses on different ways of working. And I
True.
think that it's hard to get that anywhere else. You see people asking questions that maybe, oh, well, I have that same problem.
Right.
Let's see what's going on, and I probably get in there multiple times a week. I don't
Mhm.
even know how many times, just to see
What people are
if,
talking about.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So those would be my two main, and then utilizing your team, right?
Right.
Utilize, your internal team, but also your Walmart team, because you get to that point where you get to know them and they are more than happy to help you.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And that's super helpful, Amber. Okay, so switching gears again, I think we mentioned earlier, OTIF is the big buzzword for many, many suppliers.
Mhm.
For those that are newer to Walmart, Walmart kind of, let's just say they sent shockwaves to the community when they increased the OTIF goals in, I think, was it September of 2020? And basically now for all suppliers, you have to maintain a 98% OTIF goal. So that's for both on time and in full. And there are, of course, kind of different dimensions to that, whether you're collect or prepaid. But of course, number one thing is you got to be 98% on time and in full. So a lot of the teams that we worked with, Amber, just last year was brutal for them for OTIF scores, for OTIF fines, even. Again, obviously without sharing anything crazy, was that did Igloo go through something similar just in terms of the impact? And then, kind of on the other side of that, what steps, and what best practices are you guys implementing to try to get ahead of OTIF fines specifically?
Yeah, so we absolutely felt the impacts of that. I think everyone probably is feeling
Yeah.
that. Um, it just kind of continues. So we have gone through a lot of different ways of working, trying to figure out what the best course of action is. Um, Working with our buyer and replenishment manager, we are currently implementing where we have a team that looks at OTIF weekly. So we're pulling it out and looking at it weekly. We are pulling out what our potential fines would be. And we divvy it up in, logistics and order processing and supply chain, to dig into those POs that are showing a potential fine, and digging in and seeing, okay, so if it says late, let's look at this. Let's look at the timestamps. Let's look at what happened here. And if we disagree with it and it looks like maybe it was coded wrong, maybe just something, then we put all of those details together and we send it to our supplier solutions manager and copy in our buyer and our replenishment manager.
Okay.
And so he's then taking it and he is looking through it and then working with the merchant team to decide if these are in fact valid.
Okay, so this is something that you guys are doing on a monthly basis, I assume, just based on, or weekly?
Weekly. We are doing it weekly.
Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine.
Because it was such a it was such a big deal. It is such a big deal. And then of course they've recently added in SQEP on top of, you know, the OTIF. So we're just staying on top of that. It helps just to stay with it weekly. We know what's happening each and every week.
Right, that makes sense. So wanted to kind of throw in a question from one of the members of the audience around the OTIF charge. So as we know, Walmart does not have a formal way to dispute OTIF charges. You know, you kind of have to go through the buyer in order to get that approved or not approved.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your experience, Amber, is it really just, you know, does the buck stop with the buyer? Basically, our audience member asked, you know, hey, I disputed an OTIF charge and the RM did help me. However, the buyer went on vacation and probably missed that window to get those reversed before it was invoiced. Do you know, Amber, if the RM has any authority to help reverse those charges, or does it strictly lie with the buyer? And is there any advice we can give to this supplier?
I do think that it ultimately comes down to the buyer.
Okay.
Because we went through a buyer change, and we had a buyer who they submitted everything and we were able to get all of it back. Then we have a buyer who does not do that. So it really comes down to the buyer. But if that buyer is out, I wouldn't be afraid to go one step above.
Okay.
Because the RM, honestly, the RM's not going to be able to do much. It's going to be the buyer and then the merchandising director usually.
Okay.
And honestly, they probably have the communication after the buyer anyway. So if your buyer's out, I wouldn't be afraid to reach out a step above.
Okay, no, that is super helpful. And I think, again, kind of goes back to the conversation that we were having a little bit earlier, where it's like, I totally get it. As a supplier, you're just like, I shouldn't reach out to Walmart. Like I can't. Right. But, you know, I think one thing that we all have to try and keep in mind is that as hard as it may be to believe sometimes, Walmart really does want us to be our best selves as well. Yeah. Because obviously the more they can provide support to the suppliers, the more, you know, it's cost savings that we can then funnel back into the EDLP and EDLC for Walmart. Just because I know a lot of teams that are out there that have been pushing and working through costing increases because of the OTIF program and because of SQEP and deductions. And so I think Walmart is, you know, again, may not always feel like that, but I think they are incentivized a little bit to help suppliers in order to keep that costing consistent.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, that is super helpful. So we've got another question, and this is when the fun questions start coming in. I love being able to workshop and be like a data nerd with you. Okay, so we have another team member that wrote in and said, we are currently sitting at 96% in stock. So pretty dang good, but you know, not 98%. And we do ship 100% in full. So it looks like, you know, kind of they're doing everything right, so to speak. What are some action steps that they can take to kind of push that 96% in stock over the edge and get them into that 98% realm?
I think looking to see if it is a certain subset of stores that is kind of staying at that lower, maybe they're not getting the inventory to a certain set of stores as opposed to other stores, that's keeping it kind of at that 96%. So definitely utilizing your store level inventory and I would go, you know, back and kind of see what that has looked like throughout a few months. And then just recommending either setting up as settings for certain stores, because if it is the same stores constantly, there are some settings that could be put in place at store level to keep those stores a little bit more in stock, which is going to help your overall in stock.
Ooh, that's really interesting, Amber. And kind of tacking on to that idea, I think I would maybe look at, to help kind of narrow down the two stores, usually in my experience, and of course with Walmart, your mileage may vary.
Right.
You never know, but generally speaking, and let me know if I'm way off base here, but generally speaking, I would say either it's going to be your top performing stores
Yep.
that for whatever reason, and the Pareto principle 80-20 rule totally applies to Walmart stores. So I think maybe starting by identifying what your top selling doors are and seeing
Mhm.
your point if you're just consistently turning and not able to
Yes.
keep in stocks. And then also sometimes we'll see it's a group of stores that are tied to a specific DC. So
Yes.
it could be a geographic thing where, oops, DC 6026 turned off replenishment for some reason for these 200 stores. And, they just haven't gotten in orders for the last
Yep.
however many weeks. Yeah, so that would maybe be something that our audience member can use to maybe narrow
Absolutely.
that down a little bit. From a tactical perspective, Amber, so obviously I think if it's geographic, pretty easy, just make sure that you are working with your RM to turn replenishment back on for those stores. If it is a top selling store issue, what are some levers that they can pull to say, hey, these 400 stores are our top selling stores, we need to what?
So they could increase their safety stock, which would probably be the first thing I would recommend is we need to keep more in stock.
Okay.
We need the system to trigger an order earlier
Okay.
so that they stay consistently in stock. I think that would be that's the main route I would go with a replenishment manager.
Okay. Cool. No, that's super helpful. Do you know, Amber, now I'm just kind of, again, we're nerding out a little bit. Do you know if Walmart is still doing by store level forecast tweaks, or are they no longer doing that? Are they just doing it at the corporate level?
I think that it's at corporate level now.
Okay, cool. All right. So safety stocks and also just taking a peek on maybe a certain group of stores is connected to a specific DC that is not replenishing for some reason. Okay, cool. So another question that we just received that came in, and guys, please keep the questions coming. This is when it starts to get really fun.
Yeah.
What levers do we have to pull to get products in stock when a system is not ordering after being out of stock over the last couple of months? So it might be a situation, and I'm just kind of, brainstorming with you on this, where maybe they were out of stock because the global supply chain is a global supply chain. And now it's kind of accidentally tricked Walmart's GRS system into thinking that forecast is so low because no one is buying anything. But in truth, it really needs to be XYZ.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, Amber? What are some levers that these folks can pull?
So 2 things. I would recommend reaching out to your RM about forecast adjustments. Let's review this and see where if we can't bump it up at least a little bit to help. Additionally, something that can be utilized within the GRS system is vendor allocation, where you can specifically set, like, to get these back in stock and get the forecast back up to where it needs to be. You can set a specific, depending on your order days, excuse me, your item and your vendor allocation. So I want 2,000 units ordered each day, each of my review days for this week. Those would be the systematic route you would want to go.
And from your experience, Amber, how open are RMs to that sort of action? Because and again, I'm going to be a broken record. Your mileage may vary depending on the department and the Walmart team you work with. But just generally speaking, one of the feedback that we get from a lot of the teams that we work with is Walmart always says, the phrase, let GRS fix itself. So at what point should a supplier try to get involved in manual fixes? And then, again, kind of what are the best practices that are going to create that compelling enough story for Walmart for them to go, okay, right, that's fair. We should totally implement this manual fix.
Yeah, I definitely think when you start seeing your in-stock suffer and your sales drop, those are 2 huge indicators that something needs to be done. That something internally. We need to
Mhm.
get someone in there to actually pull some levers as opposed to letting the system fix itself. Um,
It's fine. It's fine. It's
I
fine.
know I've heard that so many times.
It's fine. It's fine. Is,
Um,
is
but
there ever, have you
like,
seen like a threshold for like forecast errors, for example, where Walmart will say, hey, if it's over X%, definitely come talk to me, or what does that usually look like?
yeah, I mean, usually in my experience, it's been if there's a 20% variance of your forecast, that's usually when you want to reach out.
Okay.
But if you start seeing it consistently be under, and maybe it's not hitting that 20%, I would still like keep a really close eye on it and watch it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And something too, and you know, kind of harkening back to what we were talking about earlier, is even if your forecast is not exactly where it needs to be, you know, you also want to be keeping an eye on every other piece of your
Mhm.
supply chain, which I think a lot of times suppliers, and I've totally been guilty of this as well, but we get like our blinders on and we only look at in stock or only look at forecast
Absolutely.
without realizing Walmart has 100 weeks of supply on this product. That's
Yes.
probably why they're ordering 1 unit a week.
Yes.
so, so in those cases, Amber, where you have situations where it's just this insane weeks of supply, and it happens to the best of us, you know, you're going to have products that just don't sell or perform at the rate that you want to. What are some levers that suppliers can pull at that point? So I have a product, it really, you know, it really does have 100 weeks of supply out there. But for whatever reason, I can't get, you know, my in stocks to where it needs to be. What kind of solutions could they maybe explore?
I think that goes back to what we talked about before about looking at your top performing stores, looking at there's certain stores, because you might have 100 weeks of supply in, 50% of your stores, but the other 50% you don't. And so it's understanding your store level inventory,
Mhm.
and what levers can be pulled there, whether you need to do, a manual order or set vendor allocation.
Right, right. Okay. No, that makes total sense. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears. We got another question that came in. So we have not shipped in full for many months. And again, you guys are not alone. There are a lot of teams that are exactly like that. But
Yep.
now our warehouses are full. That's awesome to hear. But the system is not ordering enough to fill those stores. Our in stock is sitting in the high 80s. What options do we have to get the system jump started
Mhm.
and really ordering to the need?
Definitely utilizing your vendor allocation if your RM is open to that. I think that's a huge one that we've recently been really utilizing in multiple departments, is utilizing that we need this amount to ship out to keep everything flowing, because we are kind of in that same position where we've pre-built a lot of inventory, and instead of sending it all in once, we've kind of wanted to spread it out, and so we're using vendor allocation for that.
Hmm.
So an additional, you can use, instead of doing a manual order, you can do the GRS. It's like it's a manual order, but it's through the GRS system, and I'm blanking on what it is called. But it's a template you fill out. It's essentially a SSO,
Mhm.
but it goes through the system. So
Okay.
when you do a manual order, when you do an SSO,
One time,
it bypasses all of that.
right?
Now, if you utilize these vendor allocations and the manual order through GRS, it goes through the system. So the system is still able to see that as an order.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. So it's kind of seeing that as an order and then taking that into your review
Yes.
consideration.
And it's a
Okay.
supplemental order.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it
Not the
completely,
SO.
I lost it there for a minute.
You're good. You're good. Okay, so we have started getting a flurry of questions. Get excited. So Amber, I think this is more for you guys and the Igloo team. So do you guys create your own reports in Retail Link, or does your team use tools or other softwares to create dashboards? Kind of what does that look like for you guys?
We create our own reporting. We do it internally. We have utilized outside resources previously, but we've built a completely new team, and so we're utilizing our skills in-house, and just it's worked out really well so far because we can be so close to that data.
And I know the Igloo team, y'all are data rock stars. So you guys know what you're doing
We love our
too. You guys know what you're doing there. That's awesome. Okay, so we did get another question. Where in Retail Link are you getting GRS data? So it looks like this audience member is utilizing the ladder report from Walmart, but the suggested orders is basically highly inaccurate, anywhere between 50 to 80% off every week. So kind of to that point, Amber, when you guys are forecasting with your manufacturers or even forecasting to do order fulfillment, are you mostly relying on GRS, supply plan, ladder plan, every single plan? No demand out there, every plan.
We do utilize the GRS forecast mainly. We see the same thing with the ladder plan, with the recommended order, the supply plan. It does vary huge a lot of times.
Yes.
So we do use the GRS forecast that can be pulled out of DSS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a good thing to keep in mind there is that it doesn't pull like previous.
Historical, yes.
Yeah, historical. So we keep a captured forecast where we have, each week. So we can go back and look if we need to and see where our fluctuations have been. But that's been a huge useful tool for forecasting, planning, every part of the business.
Okay. That is a great point, Amber, and something, I obviously have just slightly shamelessly plug a little bit, kind of to Amber's point, and a really great pro tip, honestly, the forecast in the GRS forecast in DSS, it is a 52-week rolling. And so, obviously I will shamelessly plug Supply Pike, but there are other teams out there that do what we do that are able to kind of help you maintain that kind of forecast indefinitely so that you're not having to pull a fresh one every single week and save it down. But yes, definitely a pro tip there. So another question is, how exactly does vendor allocation work? So is that something that you have to work with your RM on and get their approval first, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, so we had an RM that actually sent me the template. It is a certain template that you use. Of course, you use a CID because GRS goes off of the CID. You put in what you want the system to order by your review day. So say you review every day of the week. So, and you want 10,000 units. So then you put 2,000 as your
every day.
That would be your order quantity. From then you have two options. You can make it a cap where the system will not order over that. It will order up to that. It could be lower, but it may not be right then. Or you can use option 2, which you can you can set it to where it will order up to that, but it rounds. So it'll round it based on ordering. And additionally, one of our RMs puts in a little bit of a buffer. So we put in our vendor allocation. She adds in a 15-20% buffer, and then somehow magic, our orders are great.
That's hilarious. And that, I assume, Amber, obviously with all things Walmart, it's kind of predicated on having a good relationship with Walmart. And I think, too, correct me if I'm wrong, but just also you'll probably have a little bit more success if you've historically done a good job for Walmart. In my experience, as long as the Walmart team trusts you and that you're going to make the right decisions for their business, it's a lot of an easier discussion to have rather than, hey, I haven't been shipping in full for the last 6 months, turn on allocation for me, or whatever it is.
And part of that is, here's the reason why. Here's what we're seeing. Say you overconsumed Walmart overconsumed their forecast and we shipped way more than anyone anticipated, back 2 months ago.
Right.
So we're in a position. So having all of that information really helps. Creating
Yes.
those partnerships where they are like, okay, they really are looking out for the business. They know what they're
Right.
talking about is huge.
Right. Right. And I think kind of, again, harkening back to what you mentioned earlier on in our discussion is being proactive with communication. One of the key points that we had in our conversation with Yum last year was she was like, if the first time I'm hearing from you is a problem, that's a
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
You should, and I think you mentioned it earlier, the second you think there may be an issue, communicate that early, communicate it often, communicate a solution.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. Always, if you're gonna take an issue, a challenge to Walmart, take some sort of solution, some options along with it.
Yes,
Always.
100%. Yes. And I think too, Amber, I kind of wanted to throw out there, I know we talked about OTIF and mitigating OTIF fines. Now, this is obviously definitely not a first line of defense. You should always be, doing your best to get ahead of OTIF problems. But I know some suppliers that have had issues with the in full challenges, and they are using vendor allocation to kind of help as a temporary kind of stopgap until they can get product in, to work with their Walmart teams to say, hey, Walmart, we only have, I'm making it up, but 10,000 units at our warehouse. Let's restrict it. Let's cap it to 1,000 a week, whatever it is, for the next 10 weeks until we have proper flow. And then we can start to replenish normally. And that has helped to diminish OTIF fines significantly. But again, this is a sort of last resort sort of thing. It should not be your first line of defense.
Just to add on to that, if you are canceling for any reason, make sure you're using the right reason codes.
Yes.
So if it's a system issue on Walmart side, use that system issue reason code, so that, because if you use anything else, likely it's going to be counted on you. But if it is honestly a Walmart issue, put that back on them so you don't have, you aren't fined for that.
Yes, 100%. I love that. Okay, so got another question that came in, Amber. So when in stocks or store on hands are too low, what are certain GRS settings that can be utilized or kind of worked with Walmart to increase that? So in the example that this supplier gave, increasing the 52-week forecast, is it C stocks, order review times, or others? What are some of the different strategies that a supplier can utilize?
Definitely look at your forecast. That's going to be always step one, is look at your forecast. See, look at your forecast over several weeks, see how it's been trending. And then, right then, okay, I need to increase my forecast. From there, if, you're still seeing maybe your forecast is pretty in line, but the orders aren't keeping up, that's when you look at increased safety stock at certain stores.
Right.
So I would always start probably with your forecast, is understanding that part of it first. And then moving on to the system settings with Walmart.
And you bring up a really great point, Amber, with like looking at your forecast over a period of time, because, there's a difference between your product went viral on TikTok and an oversold forecast for 1 week, maybe even 2 or 3, versus a true system issue.
Yes.
And so I think, and that's kind of one of the first lessons that I learned when I started doing replenishment is we were talking with one of our mutual coworkers, and I was like, I don't understand why we sold, oversold forecast. And he's like, that's just retail, baby.
Yeah.
So it's not just seeing the 1 or maybe even 2 week forecast issues. It's how has it trended over the last month? How has it trended over the last quarter? And I think too, that's going to really buffer your recommendations to Walmart as well. Because if you are sending them an email once a week saying I oversold forecast by 20% last week, they're going to be like, oh, okay. Okay.
Exactly. Take them as much information to back up your suggestion as possible.
Mhm. And kind of a follow-up question to that, Amber, from a member of our audience as well, is so we know that Walmart has been somewhat more open with, working with suppliers on either waiving OTIF fines, or, just I guess being a little bit more open with collaborating with suppliers because of all these supply chain issues. Do you foresee that that's going to continue? Has that been your experience with your Walmart team so far?
So we definitely saw it last 2020, the end of 2020. We saw it a little bit in the beginning of 2021. However, we're seeing it kind of going back to, well, this isn't a good enough reason, right? So I think it depends on your buyer. It's always going to come down to your buyer,
Always.
and maybe even what kind of mood your buyer is in at that time. You just never know, but it's worth the ask.
Right. No, 100%. And we actually just got a tip come in from a previous RM. And this is also, I love our webinars because we always have so many people from different industries, different backgrounds, and everyone loves to share their knowledge. So one of our audience members said, here's a tip for written communication. Start the subject line with your company name and then a short, distinct description of the issue. So for example, company ABC, PO maintenance question, or company ABC over forecasted item question. And it makes it easy for an RM to find your emails.
Yes.
And also understand like what's required of them.
Yes, definitely do that. And if you're looking at one item number, I've been told before to also add in your item number.
Yes,
I can. Subject.
Right. No, that's awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that, Kelly. We really appreciate it. And if you guys have other tips and tricks, please feel free to throw them either in Q&A or chat, because as we mentioned at the top of the call, it takes a village, and it's really the only way that we can all learn from each other and just be the best suppliers we
honestly can be. Coming out of Walmart and going into the supplier world, that's how I learned from everyone around me.
Yes, exactly. It really is such tribal knowledge. Like you have to learn from someone else almost. Okay, so we have another question, Amber, and I think we're just about at time, so maybe this might be the last question that we get to. But do you have any info or tips and tricks on how to best get training or resources around Retail Link? So newer supplier, Retail Link is, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is.
Where would you kind of direct this person to go to?
I would start with Supplier Academy.
Okay.
Supplier Academy is going to show a lot of your apps. It's going to show a lot of how to use them. And so that would be my first step is, set up your account, go straight to Supplier Academy and start going through those.
Yes. And it really is actually really helpful.
It is
to go through all that.
It's time consuming because there are articles, but there are also videos, and some of the videos are long, but honestly, it's so helpful.
Yes, I agree. Okay, that's super helpful. And we actually got a question that I'm going to go ahead and take just because I think it's an easier one. So where in Retail Link or in DSS do you get the GRS forecast?
So in DSS, I'm going to actually look at it real quick and I can tell you for sure.
Yes. I think it's under store summary, the store summary template. Look at
us. I run it every week, right?
Answering questions, workshopping.
Let's see.
Is Retail Link doing its classic? We're going to decide if we're going to work
together. Yeah.
And
so it is under. It is under supply chain, and it is your corporate POS forecast.
And we can send instructions
Yeah.
once we get off the call, and to how to get there directly with screenshots and all that good stuff.
Yeah, because it's to Stacy's point, it's a rolling 52. It's a future. So you have to, if you want to pull everything in, you have to, the times are a little weird. So
yeah, times are weird. The item settings have to be done a certain way. We will send instructions
yeah.
after this. Awesome. Well, Amber, we are right at time. It is 2:00. Hopefully, guys, this was a beneficial conversation for everybody. Amber, I cannot thank you enough for all of the first insights and strategy tips that you're able to share with everyone. And I'm really glad that we were able to do, some kind of quote unquote real world examples, and these are real challenges that suppliers are going through, and hopefully it's something that you guys can apply to your own processes at the companies that you work with. But yeah, so that is all that we have. We at Supply Pike will be sending a recording as well as notes from today's call. So feel free to kind of go through that or share that internally with your teams if you want to. And I believe it will also have our contact information. So if you guys have questions that you weren't able to ask during the call, or maybe you wanted to ask kind of one-on-one, please feel free to reach out to us. That is exactly what we try to do, is be an education arm, and really try to be that support within the crazy, crazy world of Walmart. But that is all that I've got for you guys. So thank you so much, Amber. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys at the next webinar. Bye, everybody.
Bye.